The alarm blared through the laboratory as Dr. Adrian Moreno hunched over his workstation, analyzing soil samples from the desolate planet Lyra. The harsh sound startled him, causing him to knock over a vial of luminescent blue liquid. The substance splattered across his pristine white coat, but failed to distract him from the flashing red notification on his holographic display. Emergency distress signal detected at Temporal Gateway 9. Unidentified life form. Protocol 772B initiated. Adrian's heart raced. Temporal gateways were strictly regulated and rarely activated without weeks of preparation and multiple layers of approval. An unscheduled activation could only mean trouble or discovery. Computer, route all data to my portable scanner and prepare the emergency kit, he commanded. His voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The computer responded with a soft chime as Adrian grabbed his field jacket and hurried toward the transportation bay. Within minutes, he was aboard a small shuttle heading toward the outskirts of Nova Haven, where the ancient civilization of Lyra had once built a network of gateways before their mysterious extinction. Nova Haven, humanity's greatest achievement in interstellar colonization, was a sprawling metropolis of crystalline towers and floating gardens. From his shuttle window, Adrian could see the stark contrast between the city's gleaming structures and the barren wilderness beyond, where the remnants of Lyra's civilization lay, scattered like forgotten dreams. As the craft descended toward the Temporal Gateway site, Adrian reviewed what little information the scientific community had gathered about Lyra. Once a thriving civilization with technology far beyond Earth's current capabilities, the Lyrans had vanished overnight nearly 2 centuries ago, leaving behind only ruins and dormant technology that researchers like Adrian were still struggling to understand. The shuttle landed with a gentle thud, and Adrian stepped out into the amber light of the alien sunset. Gateway 9 loomed before him, a massive arch of iridescent metal embedded with pulsing crystals. Standing solitary in the middle of a crater, usually dormant, the gateway now hummed with energy, its center rippling like disturbed water. Life signs confirmed. His scanner beeped. Single entity. Biological signature unknown. Adrian approached cautiously, his hand instinctively reaching for the stun device at his belt. Standard procedure when encountering unknown entities. But what he saw made him freeze in his tracks. A child, huddled at the base of the gateway, was a small figure wrapped in what appeared to be a blanket, woven from silvery threads. As Adrian drew closer, the child, a girl, he realized, looked up with eyes that reflected the stars themselves. Deep, violet irises flecked with points of light like a miniature galaxy. "Hello," Adrian said softly, crouching down to appear less intimidating. "Are you hurt?" The girl stared at him without comprehension, clutching something to her chest. A crystal pendant shaped like a heart that pulsed with an internal light. Adrian's scanner whirred as it analyzed her. Species, unknown. Closest match, Lyran, 99.7% probability. Age equivalent, approximately 8 Earth years. Impossible, Adrian thought. The Lyrans had been extinct for centuries. The girl suddenly spoke, her voice melodic and strange. Though Adrian couldn't understand her words, her fear was universal. She tried to back away, but the gateway behind her had gone dormant again, leaving only solid stone. "It's okay," Adrian said, holding up empty hands. "I won't hurt you." He activated his universal translator, but it struggled with her language, capturing only fragments. Mother, coming, promise. The protocol was clear. Any unknown alien entity needed to be reported to the Interstellar Enforcement Council immediately and transferred to a quarantine facility. But something about the girl's frightened eyes made Adrian hesitate. Just as he was considering his next move, the crystal heart pendant the girl clutched began to glow brighter, emitting a high-pitched tone that made Adrian's scanner explode in a shower of sparks. The girl looked equally startled, staring at the pendant with wide eyes. Without warning, alarm drones descended from the sky, their mechanical voices announcing, "Unauthorized biological entity detected. Quarantine protocol initiated. Stand aside, citizen." The girl screamed, the sound piercing Adrian's heart. In that instant, he made a decision that would change his life forever. "Override code Moreno Alpha 69, he shouted at the drones. "Research specimen under direct supervision of Dr. Adrian Moreno, Nova Haven Xenobiology Division." The drones hesitated, their programming conflicted. "Verification required," one droned. Adrian pulled out his identification badge, knowing the override would only buy him minutes. "Full responsibility assumed. Transport to research facility authorized." The drones processed this information, then retreated to a watchful distance. Adrian turned to the girl and slowly extended his hand. "Come with me," he said gently. "I'll keep you safe." The girl looked at his outstretched hand, then back at the dormant gateway. Whatever or whoever she was waiting for wasn't coming. With visible reluctance, she placed her tiny hand in his. Her skin was warm and slightly iridescent, with a faint pattern of what looked like constellations beneath the surface. Adrian led her quickly to his shuttle, knowing that the Interstellar Enforcement Council would be notified soon. As they lifted off, he glanced down at the small figure huddled in the passenger seat. She was staring at the gateway, tears like liquid starlight streaming down her cheeks. "I'll help you find your mother," Adrian promised, though he wasn't sure if she understood. "But first, we need to keep you safe." The girl finally turned to look at him, her galaxy eyes solemn. She touched the crystal heart at her neck, then pointed to herself. "Aurea," she said clearly. Adrian smiled. "Aurea, I'm Adrian." As the shuttle sped back toward Nova Haven, Adrian knew he was breaking virtually every protocol in the book. But looking at Aurea, possibly the last child of an extinct civilization, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. What he didn't know was that his discovery would soon attract the attention of the most powerful entities in the galaxy, and that the mystery of Aurea's appearance was just the beginning of a story that would span across time itself. The moment they entered Adrian's private laboratory, the crystal heart pendant around Aurea's neck began to pulse more intensely, emanating a soft blue light that spread throughout the room like ripples in water. Adrian watched in fascination as the light briefly interfaced with his lab equipment, causing holographic displays to flicker with symbols he didn't recognize. "Incredible," he whispered, kneeling to Aurea's eye level. "What is that, little one?" Aurea clutched the pendant protectively, shaking her head. The translator was still struggling with her language, but Adrian sensed her reluctance to part with the crystal. "It's okay," he assured her. "I won't take it from you." His communication device buzzed insistently. Adrian checked it with a grimace. 3 urgent messages from the Interstellar Enforcement Council. They already knew. "Computer, engage privacy protocols," Adrian commanded. "Route all communications through screening algorithm beta." "Privacy protocols engaged," the computer confirmed. "Warning. Unauthorized isolation of unknown biological entities violates Section 42 of the Interstellar Treaty." "Noted," Adrian muttered, turning his attention back to Aurea. The girl was exploring the lab with cautious curiosity, her fingers hovering over instruments without touching them. When she reached a holographic display showing Lyra's surface, she stopped, her eyes widening in recognition. "Home?" she asked, the word clear despite her accent. Adrian nodded. "Yes, Lyra. Your home?" Aurea nodded, then pointed to a specific region on the display, a mountain range that Adrian's team had yet to fully explore due to intense electromagnetic disturbances in the area. "Interesting," Adrian said, making a mental note. "Can you show me where you lived?" The girl touched the display, zooming in with intuitive understanding of the technology that surprised Adrian. She indicated a valley nestled between 2 peaks, then made a sweeping gesture with her hands that the translator interpreted as all gone. Adrian felt a pang of sadness. "I'm sorry, Oria." The lab door slid open, and Adrian tensed, ready to protect Oria from whoever had managed to override his privacy protocols. He relaxed slightly when he saw Dr. Helen Wu, his colleague and closest friend at the research facility. "Adrian, what have you done?" Helen asked, her eyes widening at the sight of Oria. "The council is in an uproar. They're saying you've abducted an unclassified alien entity." "I saved her," Adrian corrected. "She came through Gateway 9, alone. Helen, a child. What was I supposed to do? Let them lock her in quarantine for the rest of her life?" Helen approached slowly, her scientific curiosity overtaking her initial shock. "Is she really Lyran? That's impossible. They've been extinct for—" "I know how long they've been extinct," Adrian interrupted, "but her genetic markers are unmistakable. She's Lyran, or at least partly so." Oria watched their exchange with intelligent eyes, seeming to understand they were discussing her. She suddenly spoke, a stream of musical words that the translator struggled with before producing. "Mother will come, through the heart gate," she promised. Adrian and Helen exchanged glances. "Heart gate," Helen repeated. Oria touched her crystal pendant meaningfully. "I think she's referring to the temporal gateway," Adrian said. "But there's more to this than we understand. That pendant, it's not just jewelry. It's technology. And it's active." Helen examined her own scanner, which was picking up unusual energy readings from the crystal. "It's emitting temporal particles, similar to those found around the gateways. Adrian, do you realize what this could mean?" Before Adrian could respond, a new alarm blared through the lab, this one more urgent than the last. "Proximity alert," the computer announced. "Interstellar Enforcement Council representatives approaching. Estimated arrival, 3 minutes." Helen looked at Adrian with concern. "What's your plan? You can't hide her forever." Adrian's mind raced. The council would take Oria away, subject her to endless tests, treat her as a specimen rather than a child. He couldn't let that happen. "I need time," he said. "Time to understand where she came from, what that pendant is, and how to help her find her mother." Helen hesitated, then nodded decisively. "My private research room on level 7. It's shielded from standard scans because of my radiation experiments. Take her there. I'll delay them." Adrian gathered Oria into his arms. "Thank you, Helen." "Don't thank me yet," she replied grimly. "What you're doing could end both our careers. Or worse. But—" she looked at Oria's frightened face. "Some things matter more than protocols." As Adrian hurried through the back corridors of the facility with Oria, he felt the weight of his decision. He was risking everything for this child from another time. Yet, looking down at her trusting face, he knew he couldn't have chosen differently. "Mother?" Oria asked softly as they entered Helen's research room. "We'll find her," Adrian promised. "Somehow." The crystal heart glowed in response, as if acknowledging his vow. Adrian settled Oria in Helen's research room, which was cluttered with equipment, but comfortable enough for a temporary hideout. He found some nutrient bars in a drawer and offered one to Oria, who sniffed it cautiously before taking a small bite. "Computer, access restricted files on Lyran civilization," Adrian commanded, his voice low despite the room's soundproofing. "Focus on temporal technology and any mentions of heart gates." The computer hummed in response, projecting a holographic display of ancient Lyran texts and archaeological findings. Adrian began sifting through the information while keeping a watchful eye on Oria, who had curled up on a cushioned chair, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. "You're safe here," he told her, draping a lab coat over her like a blanket. "Rest now." Oria's eyes fluttered closed. The crystal heart still clutched in her small hand, its glow dimming as she drifted into sleep. Adrian turned his attention back to the research, so engrossed that he barely noticed when Helen slipped into the room 2 hours later. "They're gone for now," she reported, her voice tinged with stress. But Captain Kellen of the Council's Enforcement Division wasn't happy. He's requested a full genetic scan of every life form in this facility by tomorrow morning. Adrian ran a hand through his hair. "Did they believe your story? That I haven't seen you since this morning?" "Barely. Kellen's suspicious, but he doesn't have enough evidence to order a full search yet." Helen glanced at the sleeping Aurea. "How is she?" "Exhausted, but otherwise she seems healthy." "I've been researching Lyran temporal technology, trying to understand that pendant she's carrying." Adrian gestured to the holographic display, which showed images of Lyran ruins with similar crystal formations. Helen studied the display, her expertise in quantum physics allowing her to grasp concepts that even Adrian struggled with. "These crystals appear to be quantum entangled across time itself. The Lyrans were theorizing about time travel centuries before human scientists even understood basic quantum mechanics." "Could they have actually achieved it?" Adrian asked. "Could Aurea have somehow traveled through time using that gateway?" Helen's expression was grave. "If she did, it would rewrite everything we know about physics. But more importantly, it would mean that the Lyrans might not be extinct after all." Adrian finished. "They might have escaped their planet's destruction by fleeing through time, rather than space." The implications were staggering. If true, it would be the greatest scientific discovery of the century, and would put Aurea in even greater danger from those who would exploit such technology. A small sound drew their attention. Aurea was whimpering in her sleep, her face contorted in distress. The crystal heart was pulsing rapidly, projecting faint images into the air above her, ghostly shapes that resembled a woman's face, her mouth moving as if calling out. Adrian moved quickly to Aurea's side, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "Aurea, wake up. You're having a nightmare." The girl's eyes snapped open, filled with tears and confusion. "Mother!" she cried, reaching out to the fading image projected by the crystal. "Mother gone!" The translator struggled with her distressed words, but the emotion behind them needed no interpretation. Adrian held her gently as she sobbed, the crystal's light fluctuating with her emotional state. "The pendant is connected to her somehow," Helen observed quietly. "It's responding to her emotions, maybe even her thoughts." Adrian nodded, his scientific curiosity temporarily overshadowed by concern for the child in his arms. "Aurea," he said softly, when her sobs had quieted. "Can you tell us about your mother? About how you came here?" Aurea wiped her tears with the back of her hand, looking between Adrian and Helen with uncertainty, before focusing on the crystal heart. She spoke slowly, as if choosing her words carefully, and the translator captured fragments. "Bad people came. Mother said run. Heartgate to safety. She said follow after. Wait for her." Helen and Adrian exchanged glances, piecing together the fragmented story. "She sent you through the gateway to protect you," Adrian suggested gently. "And promised to follow?" Aurea nodded, her galaxy eyes solemn. "Mother knows time ways. Will find me." "Time ways," Helen repeated thoughtfully. "Their word for temporal pathways, perhaps?" "Adrian, I think her mother may have been a scientist, someone who understood how to manipulate the gateways." Adrian was about to respond when his communication device buzzed with an encrypted message from the lab's security system. "Enforcement drones dispatched to Level 7, ETA 4 minutes. "They must have detected something," Helen said urgently. "We need to move her." Adrian made a quick decision. "My apartment has a research annex that's officially decommissioned. It won't appear on their scans." He turned to Aurea. "We need to go to another safe place. Will you come with me?" Aurea clutched her pendant and nodded, her trust in Adrian already evident despite the short time they'd known each other. As they prepared to leave through Helen's private elevator, Adrian knew he was crossing a line from which there would be no return. He was no longer just bending protocols. He was actively defying the council and potentially endangering his career and freedom. But looking at Oria's face, at once alien and so very human in her fear and hope, he couldn't find it in himself to regret his choice. Something about this child had awakened a protective instinct he hadn't known he possessed. "I'll check in when we're safe," he promised Helen as the elevator doors opened. Helen nodded, her expression a mixture of concern and determination. "Be careful, Adrian. And," she hesitated, "take care of her. She needs you." As the elevator carried them away from the facility, Oria slipped her small hand into Adrian's, her galaxy eyes looking up at him with complete trust. In that moment, Adrian silently vowed to protect her, no matter what consequences he might face. Little did he know that the greatest challenge wasn't escaping the council's immediate search. It was understanding the true nature of the bond forming between him and this child from across time, and the role they would both play in a story much larger than either of them could imagine. The journey to Adrian's apartment was tense, requiring several detours to avoid enforcement drone patrols that had been dispatched throughout Nova Haven. Adrian kept Oria close, her small form hidden beneath his oversized lab coat. The crystal heart remained mercifully dim during their transit, as if sensing the need for discretion. Adrian's apartment occupied the upper level of an older building in the scientific district, modest by Nova Haven standards, but spacious enough to include the small research annex he'd mentioned to Helen. As they entered through the biometric lock, Oria gazed around with curiosity at the distinctly human living space. "Home?" she asked, the translator rendering her musical speech. "My home," Adrian clarified, guiding her inside. "And yours now, for as long as you need it." The apartment reflected Adrian's dual nature, as both scientist and humanist. One wall was covered in holographic displays showing research data, while another held actual physical books, a rarity in the digital age. Plants from various planets thrived in hydroponic units by the windows, bathing the space in natural oxygen and subtle fragrances. "Let me show you where you'll sleep," Adrian said, leading Oria to a small spare room he typically used for storage. Quickly clearing some equipment from the bed, he transformed the space into something more suitable for a child. "Tomorrow will make it nicer," he promised. Oria approached the bed cautiously, pressing her hand against the surface as if testing its reality. The translator caught her whispered words, soft like home nest. Adrian smiled. "Are you hungry? I can prepare something." The girl nodded, and Adrian led her to the kitchen area, where he instructed the food synthesizer to create a basic meal with nutrients suitable for most humanoid species. While the machine hummed, he took the opportunity to examine Oria more carefully in the apartment's bright light. Her skin had a subtle iridescence that shifted with her movements, and what he had initially taken for a birthmark on her forearm actually appeared to be a pattern of tiny symbols, almost like writing. Her hair, which seemed black at first glance, revealed deep blue and purple undertones when the light hit it directly. But it was her eyes that remained her most striking feature, violet irises containing pinpricks of light that seemed to move and swirl like real stars. Adrian had never seen anything like it in any species. The food synthesizer chimed, presenting a plate of what looked like colorful vegetables and a protein source. Oria approached cautiously, sniffing the food before taking a small bite. Her face brightened immediately. "Good," she declared, digging in with surprising enthusiasm. Adrian watched her eat, 1,000 questions swirling in his mind. As a xenobiologist, he was trained to study alien life forms, but always from a clinical, scientific perspective. Never had he found himself in the position of caretaker to a child from another time, possibly the last of her kind. When Oria had finished eating, Adrian decided it was time to try communicating more clearly. He activated his holographic display and pulled up images of Lyra, both current photographs of the barren planet and historical reconstructions of what scientists believed it had looked like during its golden age. "Aurea," he said gently, "can you tell me which of these looks like your home?" The girl studied the images solemnly, then pointed not to either of the options Adrian had presented, but to a blank space beside them. She then touched her crystal heart, which illuminated in response. Before Adrian's astonished eyes, the pendant projected a three-dimensional image into the empty space. A Lyra that matched neither the current desolation nor the scientific reconstructions. This Lyra was vibrant with life, its cities integrated seamlessly with natural formations, crystal spires rising alongside massive trees with purple foliage, flying creatures that resembled a cross between birds and luminescent jellyfish drifted between the structures. "Home," Aurea said simply. Adrian stared in wonder. "It's beautiful," he breathed. "Nothing like what we thought." The projection changed, zooming in to show a specific building, a dome-shaped structure nestled against a mountainside, surrounded by gardens of strange, geometric plants. "My home," Aurea explained, her expression wistful. "Mother's learning place." "Learning place?" Adrian repeated. "Like a school? A university?" Aurea struggled to explain, the translator flickering between terms. "Time study place. Mother makes heart gates." Adrian's excitement grew. "Your mother is a scientist? She creates the gateways?" Aurea nodded vigorously, pleased that he understood. The projection shifted again, showing a woman working with crystals similar to Aurea's pendant. The image was somewhat blurry, but Adrian could make out a tall, slender figure with the same iridescent skin and star-filled eyes as Aurea. "Mother," Aurea said, reaching toward the image with longing. "Mira." "Mira," Adrian repeated. "That's her name." The girl nodded, then suddenly yawned widely, her small body sagging with exhaustion. The projection from the crystal heart faded. "You need rest," Adrian said, realizing how overwhelming this day must have been for her. "We'll talk more tomorrow." He helped Aurea settle into the bed, making sure she was comfortable. As he turned to leave, her small voice stopped him. "Adrian, stay," she asked, her galaxy eyes wide with vulnerability. Something tightened in Adrian's chest, a protective feeling he'd never experienced before. Without hesitation, he pulled up a chair beside her bed. "I'll stay until you fall asleep," he promised. Aurea smiled, clutching her crystal heart as she closed her eyes. Within minutes, her breathing had deepened into sleep. Adrian remained seated, watching over this extraordinary child who had inexplicably become his responsibility. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. He needed to contact Helen, continue researching the Lyran temporal technology, and somehow keep Aurea hidden from the council. But for now, in the quiet of his apartment with this child from across time sleeping peacefully beside him, Adrian felt a strange sense of rightness. Whatever consequences came from his decision to protect Aurea, he knew in his heart he would never regret it. As Aurea slept, the crystal heart glowed softly, occasionally projecting faint, dreamlike images above her, fragments of a world long gone, and a mother searching through the pathways of time to find her child. Days passed, establishing a routine that gave both Adrian and Aurea a sense of stability amidst the uncertainty of their situation. Each morning, Adrian would conduct gentle examinations to monitor Aurea's health, followed by language lessons to improve their communication. The translator was becoming more effective as it adapted to Aurea's speech patterns, but Adrian was determined to teach her English as well. Aurea proved to be an exceptionally quick learner, absorbing new vocabulary with ease and showing an intuitive understanding of scientific concepts that would have challenged most human children twice her age. By the end of the first week, she could carry on basic conversations without the translator's help. "Adrian," she asked one morning as they shared breakfast, "why stars different here?" Adrian looked up from his coffee, momentarily confused. Different how? Aurea pointed to the window, where the morning sky was visible. Patterns wrong. Not like home stars. Understanding dawned on Adrian. Of course, the constellations would appear different from Nova Haven than from Lyra. He pulled up a holographic display showing star charts. Can you show me what your stars look like? With careful concentration, Aurea rearranged the holographic stars into patterns that Adrian didn't recognize. He saved the configuration, making a mental note to analyze it later. It might provide clues about not just where, but when Aurea had come from. Throughout these days, Helen visited whenever she could, bringing supplies and updates on the Council's investigation. The news was concerning. Captain Kellen of the Enforcement Division had expanded the search and was conducting random genetic scans throughout Nova Haven. They're determined to find her, Helen reported during her latest visit, her voice low, despite the apartment's privacy shields. Kellen is calling her a potential biological threat to justify the invasive measures. Adrian frowned, glancing to where Aurea sat, engrossed in a holographic puzzle game Helen had brought her. She's a child, not a threat. I know that, Helen said patiently. But the Council operates on protocols, not compassion. And there's something else. They're especially interested in the energy signature from her pendant. Something about it has the quantum physicists in a frenzy. This didn't surprise Adrian. In the days since bringing Aurea home, he had been conducting his own research on the crystal heart, careful not to separate it from Aurea, but measuring its emissions while she wore it. The results were astonishing. The crystal emitted particles that shouldn't exist according to current scientific understanding. Particles that seem to exist partially, outside normal spacetime. I think it's a key, Adrian told Helen, showing her his findings. Not just to the gateways, but to specific points in time. Aurea calls it a time thread in her language. Helen studied the data, her expression growing increasingly amazed. This technology, Adrian, it's beyond anything we've theorized. If Aurea's mother could create these devices, then she might be able to find her way to this time, Adrian finished. That's what I'm counting on. Helen gave him a searching look. And what happens then? If her mother comes through a gateway, the Council will detect it immediately. They'll capture both of them. Adrian had been wrestling with this problem. I'm working on it. If I can understand how the pendant functions, maybe I can create a private gateway, something the Council won't detect. That's ambitious, Helen said diplomatically, and risky. Before Adrian could respond, Aurea suddenly cried out, dropping the puzzle game and clutching her crystal heart, which had begun to pulse with an intense light. Both adults rushed to her side as she curled into herself, her face contorted in pain. Aurea, what's wrong? Adrian asked, reaching for her but hesitating, afraid to make things worse. Hurts, Aurea gasped, her galaxy eyes wide with fear. Mother calling, too far, hurts. The crystal projected chaotic images into the air, fragmented glimpses of a woman running, of strange creatures in pursuit, of a gateway shimmering with unstable energy. The projection was accompanied by a high-pitched sound that made Adrian's teeth ache. Helen reacted quickly, pulling a medical scanner from her bag and running it over Aurea. Her neural patterns are accelerating beyond safe parameters. It's like her brain is trying to process too much information at once. Adrian made a split-second decision, gently taking Aurea's face in his hands and forcing her to look at him, rather than the distressing projections. Aurea, listen to me. You need to let go of the pendant, just for a moment. No, Aurea cried, clutching it tighter. Mother's thread! I know, Adrian said soothingly, but it's hurting you right now. Just let go for a few seconds. I promise we won't take it from you. Tears streaming down her face. Aurea finally released her grip on the crystal heart. The moment she did, the projections vanished and the high-pitched sound ceased. Aurea slumped forward, exhausted, and Adrian caught her in his arms. Helen's scanner showed Oria's vital signs returning to normal. "She's stabilizing," she reported with relief. "But Adrian, what just happened?" Adrian cradled Oria gently, his mind racing with implications. "I think her mother tried to make contact through the pendant. Oria called it a time thread. What if it's literally a connection between them, stretched across time?" "But the connection is too strained," Helen theorized, causing feedback that Oria's nervous system couldn't handle. Oria stirred in Adrian's arms, her eyes fluttering open. "Mother in danger," she whispered weakly. "Bad people chasing." Adrian and Helen exchanged alarmed glances. "Who's chasing her, Oria?" Adrian asked gently. Oria struggled to find the words, the translator working overtime to interpret her distressed speech. "Time guards. Say mother broke time law." "Time guards?" Helen repeated. "Some kind of temporal enforcement agency from her time?" Adrian's mind was already leaping ahead. If her mother is being pursued for breaking time law and sent Oria through a gateway... He trailed off, the implications staggering. Then Oria might be evidence of whatever temporal crime her mother committed. Helen finished, her expression grave. Oria seemed to sense their concern, weakly reaching for her pendant again. Adrian gently stopped her. "Rest first," he urged. "You can try again when you're stronger." The girl nodded, her eyelids heavy. Within moments, she had fallen into an exhausted sleep, still cradled in Adrian's arms. He carefully carried her to her bed, tucking her in with a gentleness that came naturally now. When he returned to the living area, Helen was pacing, her scientific mind clearly working through possibilities. If there's some kind of temporal enforcement agency in Oria's time, pursuing her mother for violations involving time travel, she began. Then our Interstellar Enforcement Council might be the least of our worries, Adrian concluded grimly. Helen nodded. We need to understand that pendant better, figure out how it works and what it's actually doing. Because if it's creating a bridge across time that both Oria's mother and these time guards can potentially follow, then we need to be prepared, Adrian said, his resolve strengthening. For whatever, or whoever, comes through next. As if in response to his words, an alert chimed softly from his security system. Adrian quickly checked the display and felt his blood run cold. Enforcement drones, he reported tersely, conducting a building-by-building scan of this district. Helen moved quickly to the window, peering cautiously through the opacity filter. They're starting at the north end. We have maybe 20 minutes before they reach this building. Adrian looked toward Oria's room, his decision already made. We need to move her. Now. As they hurried to prepare, neither noticed the crystal heart on Oria's chest beginning to glow once more, this time with a steady, determined light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. Across time and space, a connection was strengthening, drawing together threads of a story that had only just begun to unfold. The scan of Adrian's building was imminent, with practiced efficiency born from days of contingency planning. Adrian gathered the essentials, Oria's few belongings, his portable research equipment, emergency rations, and the secure data crystal containing his research on Lyran temporal technology. Helen gently woke Oria, explaining in simple terms that they needed to leave quickly. The girl was disoriented but cooperative, clutching her crystal heart pendant, which had returned to its normal, softly glowing state. My laboratory at the university has a sub-basement that doesn't appear on official records, Helen told Adrian as they prepared to leave. It was used for radiation experiments decades ago and was officially decommissioned, but I've maintained it for private research. Adrian nodded gratefully. That should work for now. How do we get there without being detected? Helen smiled, a hint of mischief in her expression. The old service tunnels. They're officially condemned, but they're still structurally sound. I've been using them to move sensitive equipment off the record for years. Adrian raised an eyebrow, seeing his colleague in a new light. Helen Wu, I'm beginning to think there's a lot I don't know about you. Science often requires creative approaches to bureaucracy, she replied with a shrug. Now, let's move before those drones get here. They slipped out through the building's maintenance access. Adrian, carrying Aurea, who was still weak from her earlier episode. The service tunnels were dimly lit and musty, but provided a direct route to the university complex without exposing them to the aerial drones scanning the city. As they navigated the labyrinthine passages, Adrian found himself growing increasingly concerned about Aurea's condition. Though conscious, she was unnaturally quiet, her galaxy eyes distant, as if seeing things beyond their reality. Are you feeling all right? He asked softly. Aurea blinked, focusing on his face with effort. Mother closer now, she whispered. Can feel her searching. Adrian exchanged a glance with Helen, who was leading the way with a small light. They had theorized that the pendant created some kind of quantum entanglement between Aurea and her mother, but the implications of such a connection were still unclear and potentially dangerous. Can you tell where she is? Adrian asked carefully. Aurea's brow furrowed in concentration. Not here now, she said after a moment, struggling with the concepts. Behind time, trying to find right door. Before Adrian could ask for clarification, they reached a heavy metal door marked with faded radiation warnings. Helen pressed her palm against a concealed scanner, and the door slid open with a protesting groan. Welcome to my private laboratory, she said, ushering them inside. The space beyond was surprisingly comfortable despite its original purpose. Helen had converted the radiation-shielded chamber into a combination living space and research facility. Equipment shared space with a small kitchenette and comfortable seating area. Most importantly, the thick walls and specialized shielding would hide them from standard scans. This is perfect, Adrian said, gently setting Aurea down on a cushioned bench. Thank you, Helen. Helen waved away his gratitude, already moving to activate her equipment. Let's use this opportunity to conduct a more thorough analysis of Aurea's pendant. The shielding here will contain any energy signatures it emits. Adrian hesitated, looking at Aurea. Only if you're feeling strong enough, he told her. And only if you're comfortable with it. Aurea considered this, then slowly nodded. Want to help Mother find me, she said simply. With Aurea's permission, they set up a non-invasive scanning array around her, careful not to separate her from the crystal heart. Helen's equipment was more sophisticated than what Adrian had access to in his apartment, allowing for deeper analysis of the pendant's quantum properties. As the scan progressed, Helen's expression grew increasingly amazed. I don't even have words for what I'm seeing, she said, studying the results. The crystal isn't just emitting temporal particles. It's creating what appears to be a stable wormhole on a quantum scale. A wormhole, Adrian repeated, astonished. Through time? Helen nodded, her eyes never leaving the display. A microscopic one. Yes, too small for matter to pass through, but potentially large enough for information. It's like a quantum communication channel that ignores temporal distance. Adrian leaned closer to the display, his scientific curiosity momentarily overshadowing everything else. So Aurea and her mother could theoretically communicate through it? In theory, yes, though the human or Lyran brain isn't designed to process information transmitted this way. That might explain Aurea's reaction earlier. Helen adjusted the scanner, revealing new layers of data. But there's more. The crystal appears to be mapping temporal coordinates, almost like it's searching for a specific point in time. Aurea had been watching them quietly, but now she spoke up, her voice stronger than before. Mother made Heartgate to find me. Said pattern would lead her. Adrian turned to her. Pattern? What kind of pattern, Aurea? In response, Aurea touched her pendant, which projected a complex, spiraling design into the air, a series of interconnected symbols that resembled both mathematical equations and artistic patterns. Time path, she explained. My life thread. Mother follows. Helen studied the pattern with growing excitement. It's a temporal signature, unique to Aurea, like temporal DNA. She turned to Adrian, her eyes wide. I think her mother created this pendant to track Aurea across time itself, using her unique temporal signature as a homing beacon. The implications were staggering. If Mira could track her daughter across time using this technology, it meant the Lyrans had developed capabilities far beyond anything modern science had even theorized. Adrian was about to respond when Aurea suddenly stiffened, her galaxy eyes widening. The crystal heart began to pulse rapidly, its light intensifying. Mother! Aurea cried, half in joy and half in fear. Mother coming, but others too! The pendant projected a new image. A woman running toward what appeared to be a gateway, with shadowy figures in pursuit. The projection was clearer than before, allowing Adrian to see Mira's face for the first time. She was beautiful, in an otherworldly way, with the same iridescent skin and galaxy eyes as Aurea. Though her features were more angular, her expression fierce with determination. Adrian felt an unexpected jolt of recognition, as if he'd seen her before, though he knew that was impossible. The projection showed Mira reaching the gateway, turning to face her pursuers with what appeared to be a weapon made of crystal, similar to Aurea's pendant. She fired it, creating a blinding flash that temporarily halted the shadowy figures, then turned back to the gateway, pressing her hand against its surface. Her lips moved, and though no sound accompanied the projection, Adrian could read the word she spoke, Aurea. The projection collapsed as Aurea cried out, clutching her head in pain. Adrian moved quickly to her side, supporting her as she swayed. She's coming through, Aurea gasped. Now! Helen's equipment suddenly went haywire, alarms blaring as energy readings spiked off the charts. Something's happening, she shouted over the noise. The quantum wormhole is expanding. Adrian held Aurea protectively, as the air in the center of the laboratory began to shimmer and distort, forming a swirling vortex of light that grew rapidly in size. The vortex stabilized into a portal, similar to the gateway where he had found Aurea. But this one appeared less stable, its edges fluctuating wildly. Through the chaotic energy of the portal, Adrian could make out a figure approaching, a woman running toward them, pursued by indistinct shapes. She was almost at the threshold when the portal suddenly contracted, its light dimming. No! Aurea screamed, reaching toward the failing portal. Mother! Without thinking, Adrian lunged forward, extending his hand toward the rapidly closing gateway. For a brief moment, his fingers brushed against another hand reaching from the other side, a hand with iridescent skin and a strange, angular device clutched in its grip. There was a blinding flash, and Adrian was thrown backward by an invisible force. When his vision cleared, the portal was gone, and he was lying on the floor with something clutched in his hand, a small, rectangular device covered in Lyran symbols. Aurea rushed to his side, her galaxy eyes wide with concern. Adrian hurt? I'm okay, he assured her, sitting up slowly. He examined the device in his hand. What is this? Aurea stared at it in wonder. Mother's memory keeper, she whispered. Her journal. Helen helped Adrian to his feet, her scientific curiosity temporarily overridden by concern. That was incredibly reckless, she scolded him. You could have been killed, or worse, pulled into whatever time she was coming from. Adrian barely heard her, his attention fixed on the device in his hand. If this truly was Mira's journal, it might contain crucial information about Lyran temporal technology, and about how to help her reach them safely. Can you read this? He asked Aurea, showing her the symbols on the device. Aurea nodded, touching a specific pattern on its surface. The device hummed to life, projecting holographic text in the Lyran language. "It's her research," Aurea said, scanning the projection. "And," her voice faltered, "messages for me." Adrian placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Would you like to read them privately?" Aurea considered this, then shook her head. "Need help understanding? Science words hard." Helen was already examining her equipment, which was still recording data from the brief portal manifestation. Whatever just happened, it left a trace, a temporal echo that's still resonating through this location. If her mother tries again, it might be easier for her to create a stable connection here. Adrian nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. With Mira's journal, they might be able to understand the technology well enough to help her complete the journey across time. But the shadowy figures pursuing her remained a concern. "Aurea," he asked gently, "who were those people chasing your mother? The time guards?" Aurea's expression darkened. "Bad people. Say mother broke time law by sending me here." She hesitated, then added in a small voice, "Say I not supposed to exist now." Adrian and Helen exchanged troubled glances. If these time guards believed Aurea's very presence in this time period was a violation, they might be pursuing her as well as her mother. "We won't let them take you," Adrian promised, the protective feeling in his chest intensifying. "We'll find a way to bring your mother here safely, and we'll protect both of you." Aurea looked up at him with trust in her galaxy eyes. "Mother will like you," she said simply. "You, good heart." Something about her words caused an unexpected warmth to spread through Adrian's chest. He had begun this journey out of scientific curiosity and compassion for a lost child. But now, he found himself increasingly invested in reuniting Aurea with her mother. Not just for Aurea's sake, but because he found himself inexplicably drawn to the mysterious woman who had created such extraordinary technology to save her daughter. As they settled in to study Mira's journal, Adrian couldn't shake the sensation that had passed through him when his fingers briefly touched hers across time. A jolt of recognition that made no logical sense, yet felt undeniably real. Little did he know that this brief connection had altered the temporal echo, creating a bridge that would soon bring Mira closer than anyone could have anticipated, along with dangers that threatened not just their lives, but the very fabric of time itself. The days that followed were a blur of intense research and preparation. Mira's journal proved to be an invaluable resource, though translating and understanding the advanced Lyran science it contained was challenging even with Aurea's help. The girl's vocabulary for complex scientific concepts was limited, but her intuitive understanding of the principles involved often surpassed even Helen's. "It's remarkable," Helen commented, as they worked late into the night, Aurea having finally fallen asleep on a makeshift bed nearby. "She seems to grasp temporal mechanics on an almost instinctual level." Adrian nodded, studying a complex diagram they'd managed to extract from the journal. According to Mira's notes, the Lyrans evolved with a different relationship to time than humans. They could perceive temporal currents naturally, something about their neural structure. That would explain Aurea's connection to the pendant, Helen mused. It's not just technology to her, it's an extension of her natural abilities. Adrian glanced at the sleeping child, a question that had been bothering him finally surfacing. "Helen, if the Lyrans had this capability, why did they disappear? With technology this advanced, they could have escaped whatever catastrophe befell their civilization." Helen considered this, her expression troubled. "Perhaps they did. Maybe they didn't go extinct at all. They just left, evacuated through time rather than space. Which would mean," Adrian began, "that the empty ruins we've been studying might not be the aftermath of an extinction, but of an evacuation," Helen finished. "And if that's true, then Aurea might not be the last of her kind, just separated from her people." The thought was both comforting and concerning. If the Lyrans had mastered time travel to this extent, where or when had they gone? And why was Mira being pursued by these time guards for retrieving her daughter? Adrian turned his attention back to the journal, focusing on a section they had only partially translated, something about temporal divergence and paradox prevention. The more he learned about Lyran temporal science, the more he realized how dangerous their situation might be. According to what they could decipher, the Lyrans had developed strict protocols around time travel, precisely because of the risks involved. Unauthorized temporal displacement could create paradoxes or timeline fractures with catastrophic consequences. The time guards appeared to be responsible for preventing such outcomes. But if that was the case, why would Mira, apparently a respected temporal scientist, violate these protocols to send Aurea through time? What could have been so dire that she would risk not only her position, but potentially the stability of time itself? Adrian was still pondering these questions the next morning when Aurea awoke with a startled cry. The crystal heart pendant was pulsing rapidly, projecting fragmented images too quick to follow. "Aurea, what's happening?" Adrian asked, rushing to her side. The girl's galaxy eyes were wide with a mixture of excitement and fear. "Mother, closer. Used memory keeper connection. Found right path." Helen, who had been sleeping in the adjacent room, hurried in, immediately checking her equipment. "The temporal echo is intensifying," she reported. "It's like the previous attempt created a more stable bridge." Adrian remembered the sensation of his fingers brushing against Mira's across time. Had that brief contact somehow strengthened the connection? "When?" he asked Aurea. "When is she coming?" Aurea closed her eyes, concentrating on the pendant's pulses. "Soon. Very soon. But—" her expression clouded. "Time guards know too, following her trail." Adrian made a quick decision. "We need to prepare. If Mira makes it through, the Council's sensors will detect the temporal event immediately. We need a distraction." Helen raised an eyebrow. "What kind of distraction could possibly hide a temporal incursion?" Adrian's expression was grim, but determined. "A bigger one. If we can access one of the official gateways and trigger a controlled activation sequence, it might mask Mira's arrival." "That's incredibly risky," Helen said. "Not to mention probably illegal on about 6 different levels." "Do you have a better idea?" Adrian challenged gently. Helen sighed. "Unfortunately, no. But getting access to a gateway without authorization—" "I still have my credentials," Adrian pointed out. "They haven't been revoked yet, just flagged for monitoring. If I'm careful, I might be able to get into Gateway 9, the same one Aurea came through. The systems there would already be calibrated to Lyran temporal signatures." Aurea had been listening to their exchange with increasing agitation. "I go too," she insisted. "Help Mother find way." Adrian shook his head firmly. "It's too dangerous, Aurea. If the Council catches you—" "Mother needs me," Aurea interrupted with unexpected force. "Pendant is beacon. Without me, she might get lost between times." Helen gave Adrian a meaningful look. "She might be right. From what we've translated of the journal, these temporal passages seem to require an anchor point, a fixed quantum signature to lock onto. Aurea and her pendant could be that anchor." Adrian ran a hand through his hair, torn between the need to keep Aurea safe and the realization that without her, their plan might fail entirely. Finally, he nodded reluctantly. "Okay, but you stay hidden until we're sure it's safe. Promise me?" Aurea nodded solemnly. "Promise." The plan took shape quickly. Helen would create a distraction in the main research facility, triggering an alarm that would draw security away from Gateway 9. Meanwhile, Adrian would use his credentials to access the gateway, bringing Aurea with him concealed in a research transport pod. Once there, they would use Mira's journal to recalibrate the gateway to match the temporal coordinates embedded in Aurea's pendant. As they prepared to leave the safety of Helen's hidden laboratory, Adrian felt a growing sense of anticipation mixed with dread. They were about to attempt something unprecedented, a deliberate temporal extraction, using technology they only partially understood. If they succeeded, they would reunite a mother and daughter separated by time itself. If they failed, Adrian pushed the thought away, focusing instead on the determined child beside him. Over the short time they had been together, he had grown to care for Aurea deeply. Her courage, intelligence, and unwavering hope had touched something in him that he hadn't realized was there, a capacity for paternal love that transcended species and time. "Ready?" he asked her softly. Aurea nodded, clutching her crystal heart with one hand and Adrian's fingers with the other. "Ready." As they moved through the service tunnels toward the transportation hub, Adrian couldn't shake the feeling that whatever happened next would change not just their lives, but potentially the course of history itself. The weight of that responsibility should have been terrifying, but with Aurea's small hand in his, all he felt was resolve. They would bring Mira home to her daughter, or risk everything in the attempt. The plan started smoothly enough. Helen's distraction, a carefully orchestrated accident in the quantum physics lab that released harmless but impressively colorful smoke, drew security personnel away from Gateway 9 as expected. Adrian's credentials, while flagged, still granted him access to the transportation system that would take them to the Gateway complex. Aurea remained hidden in the research transport pod, a specialized container designed to safely move sensitive biological specimens. It was cramped, but equipped with its own atmosphere and communication system, allowing Adrian to reassure her throughout the journey. "Almost there," he murmured into the pod's communication unit as they approached the Gateway complex. "Remember to stay absolutely quiet until I tell you it's safe." "Yes," came Aurea's whispered reply, the pod muffling her musical accent. The Gateway complex was eerily quiet when they arrived, most of the staff having been called to assist with the emergency at the main facility. Only a skeleton crew remained, focused on monitoring equipment rather than physical security. Adrian moved with purposeful confidence through the corridors, his lab coat and identification badge providing the perfect cover. When questioned by a technician, he smoothly explained that he was transporting sensitive Lyran soil samples for analysis. Technically not a lie, given Aurea's Lyran origins. Finally, they reached Gateway 9. The massive arch stood dormant, its embedded crystals dull without the energy that activated them. Adrian set the transport pod down carefully and began accessing the control systems, entering a research protocol he had created specifically for this purpose. "Initiating deep scan of Gateway crystalline matrix," he announced for the benefit of the monitoring systems. "Temporal resonance analysis. Authorization, Moreno Delta 73. The computers accepted his credentials and commands, powering up the Gateway's diagnostic systems. As the technicians were occupied with their own work, Adrian quickly connected Mira's journal device to the Gateway controls, using the knowledge they had gleaned from its contents to modify the scanning parameters. Once he was certain they were unobserved, he opened the transport pod, helping Aurea emerge quietly. The girl's galaxy eyes widened at the sight of the massive gateway, the same one she had come through what seemed like a lifetime ago. "This is where I found you," Adrian whispered, guiding her toward a concealed position behind the control console. "Now, we need to help your mother find her way here." Aurea nodded, clutching her crystal heart pendant. "What do I do?" "Focus on your mother," Adrian instructed, recalling the journal's descriptions of Lyran temporal techniques. "Think about her as strongly as you can. The pendant will amplify your connection." As Aurea closed her eyes in concentration, Adrian continued his work on the gateway controls, carefully modifying the standard protocols to incorporate the Lyran temporal coordinates. It was delicate work, requiring precise calculations and timing. "Dr. Moreno," a voice called from across the chamber, causing Adrian's heart to skip a beat. "I wasn't informed you had authorization to access Gateway 9. Adrian straightened slowly, turning to face a tall, stern-looking man in the distinctive gray uniform of the Interstellar Enforcement Council. The insignia on his collar identified him as Captain Kellen, the very officer who had been leading the search for Aurea. "Captain," Adrian acknowledged calmly, despite his racing pulse. "I'm conducting standard resonance testing on the gateway crystals. The recent temporal anomaly originated here, as you know." Kellen approached, his gaze sweeping the area suspiciously. "Interesting timing, Doctor, especially given the commotion at the main facility. I prefer to work when there are fewer distractions," Adrian replied smoothly, positioning himself to block Kellen's view of Aurea's hiding place. The captain's eyes narrowed. "And what exactly are you hoping to find with these tests?" Adrian thought quickly. "Patterns in the crystalline structure that might explain the anomaly. If we can understand what happened, we can prevent future incidents." Kellen seemed about to respond when a sudden alarm blared from the gateway controls. The massive arch began to hum, its embedded crystals lighting up with an internal fire that spread rapidly through the structure. "What have you done?" Kellen demanded, reaching for his weapon. "Nothing," Adrian protested, the alarm genuinely surprising him. He glanced at his modified protocols. They shouldn't have activated the gateway yet. Then he saw Aurea, no longer hiding, but standing before the gateway, her crystal heart pendant blazing with light that matched the gateway's growing illumination perfectly. She had initiated the connection herself, using her innate Lyran abilities to amplify the pendant's power. "Stop her!" Kellen shouted, drawing his weapon and aiming at Aurea. Adrian moved without thinking, tackling the captain to the ground. They struggled briefly before Kellen's superior training gave him the advantage, flipping Adrian onto his back and pinning him. "You have no idea what you're interfering with," Kellen snarled. "That child is a temporal anomaly that could destroy the fabric of reality itself." "She's a little girl trying to find her mother," Adrian shot back, struggling against Kellen's grip. A deafening roar drowned out their conflict as the gateway fully activated, its center transforming into a swirling vortex of energy far more powerful than the small portal that had briefly appeared in Helen's laboratory. The technicians fled in panic, triggering facility-wide alarms that would soon bring reinforcements. Adrian took advantage of Kellen's momentary distraction to break free, rushing toward Aurea, who stood transfixed before the gateway, her arms outstretched toward the vortex. "Aurea!" he called over the roar of energy. "Step back, it's not stable!" But the girl didn't move, her galaxy eyes reflecting the swirling energies as she called out in her native language, words the translator couldn't capture, but whose meaning was clear in their emotional intensity. She was calling for her mother. The vortex pulsed, contracting and expanding erratically. Through the chaos, Adrian caught glimpses of another place, a laboratory filled with crystal technology, figures moving frantically in the background, and at the forefront, a woman running toward the portal from the other side. Mita. She was more clearly visible now than in the projections, her features determined, her galaxy eyes, so like Aurea's, fixed on her daughter across the temporal divide. She carried something that resembled a weapon in one hand and what looked like another crystal heart pendant in the other. "Mother!" Aurea cried, her voice somehow cutting through the gateway's roar. Adrian saw Mira's lips form her daughter's name in response. She was so close now, just steps away from crossing the threshold, when shadowy figures appeared behind her, humanoid, but with an unsettling fluidity to their movements, wearing armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The Time Guards. One of them fired a weapon that released a burst of energy toward Mira. She dodged, returning fire with her own weapon, but the distraction cost her precious seconds as the gateway began to destabilize, its edges flickering ominously. Adrian made a split-second decision. Despite the danger, he lunged forward, reaching into the vortex toward Mira. "Take my hand," he shouted, though he wasn't sure if sound could travel through the temporal barrier. Whether she heard him, or simply saw his outstretched hand, Mira responded, leaping forward and grasping his fingers with surprising strength. The contact sent a shock through Adrian's system, not painful, but intensely disorienting, as if his consciousness was suddenly stretched across multiple points in time simultaneously. With all his strength, he pulled, feeling the resistance of time itself as he drew Mira toward their reality. Aurea joined him, her small hands adding their strength to his effort, the crystal heart blazing so brightly it was almost blinding. There was a final surge of energy, a sensation like reality itself tearing at the seams. And then Mira tumbled through the gateway, collapsing onto the floor of the chamber with Adrian and Aurea beside her. The gateway gave one final, violent pulse before shutting down completely, leaving an ominous silence in its wake. For a moment, no one moved. Adrian's ears rang in the sudden quiet, his vision slowly clearing to reveal Mira lying beside him, her iridescent skin faintly glowing in the dim emergency lighting that had activated during the power surge. She was even more striking in person, tall and slender, with angular features that managed to be both alien and beautiful. Her galaxy eyes larger than Aurea's, but filled with the same swirling stars. "Mother!" Aurea cried, throwing herself at Mira, who embraced her daughter with desperate intensity, murmuring words in their native language that needed no translation. Adrian watched them, a complex mixture of emotions washing over him: relief, wonder, and something else he couldn't quite name. When Mira finally looked up from her daughter, her galaxy eyes met his, and that strange jolt of recognition returned, stronger than before. "You," she said in accented but understandable English, surprising Adrian. "You helped her, protected her." Before Adrian could respond, Kellen's voice cut through the moment. "All of you, don't move." The captain had recovered his weapon and was aiming it at Mira, his expression cold. "By authority of the Interstellar Enforcement Council, I am placing you under arrest for unauthorized temporal manipulation, harboring a temporal fugitive, and interfering with Council operations." Adrian moved instinctively to shield both Mira and Aurea. "This woman has done nothing wrong," he protested. "She was only trying to reach her child." "That child is a temporal anomaly," Kellen retorted. "And this woman has violated fundamental laws of reality by bringing her here. The consequences could be catastrophic." Mira rose gracefully to her feet, keeping Aurea behind her. When she spoke, her voice was calm but carried an unmistakable authority. "Your understanding of temporal physics is limited," she said, her accent giving the words an exotic cadence. "My daughter's presence here creates no paradox. She belongs in this timeline now." Kellen's expression didn't change. "That's for the Council to determine, not you." The standoff was interrupted by the arrival of Helen, breathless and disheveled from what must have been a frantic journey from the main facility. "Adrian!" she called, then stopped short at the tableau before her, Adrian protecting Mira and Aurea, Kellen aiming his weapon at all three of them. "Dr. Wu," Kellen acknowledged with a slight nod, "I suggest you step away. This situation is under Council jurisdiction now." Helen assessed the situation quickly, her scientific mind clearly working through options. "Captain, before you take any action, you should know that we've been conducting authorized research on Lyran temporal physics. These individuals are crucial to that research." "Authorized by whom?" Kellen demanded skeptically. "By me," came a new voice from the entrance to the chamber. All heads turned to see an elderly man in the formal robes of the Scientific Oversight Committee, the one organization with authority that occasionally superseded even the Enforcement Council. Adrian recognized Dr. Isaiah Chen, the legendary physicist whose theories had helped humanity understand the gateways in the first place. "Dr. Chen," Kellen said, lowering his weapon slightly out of respect. "With all due respect, sir, this is a security matter, not a scientific one." "On the contrary," Chen replied, approaching with measured steps. When it comes to temporal physics, security and science are inseparable. He turned to Mira with evident curiosity. You must be the Lyran temporal physicist, whose work I've been studying through the Gateway artifacts. Your understanding of time is revolutionary. Mira inclined her head respectfully. And you must be the human scientist whose equations allowed your people to activate our gateways. Your work is impressive for one with limited temporal perception. Despite the tension of the moment, Adrian couldn't help but smile at the professional respect evident in this exchange between scientists from different times and species. Chen turned to Kellen. Captain, I am invoking Section 7 of the Scientific Discovery Protocol. These individuals are now under the protection of the Oversight Committee pending full investigation of their scientific significance. Sir, Kellen protested, the potential risks are theoretical at best, Chen interrupted firmly. Whereas the potential knowledge to be gained is immeasurable. He glanced at Aurea, his expression softening. Besides, I see no threat in a child reunited with her mother. Kellen hesitated, clearly torn between his orders and the authority of a scientific legend. Finally, he lowered his weapon completely. I'll need to report this to the council, he said stiffly. Of course, Chen agreed. Tell them I'll provide a full briefing tomorrow. For now, I'm taking these people to my private research facility where we can discuss their situation properly. As Kellen reluctantly departed, Chen turned to Adrian with a knowing look. Dr. Moreno, I believe you have quite a story to tell me. As do you, he added, looking at Mira with undisguised scientific curiosity. Adrian found his voice at last. Dr. Chen, how did you know to come here? The older scientist smiled. Dr. Wu sent me a rather intriguing message about Lyran temporal physics that convinced me to investigate personally. Fortunately, I arrived just in time to witness what may be the most significant scientific event of the century. He glanced at the now dormant gateway. A controlled temporal extraction. Remarkable. Helen stepped forward. We should leave before Kellen changes his mind or calls for backup. Chen nodded in agreement. My transport is waiting. Shall we? As they prepared to leave, Mira approached Adrian. Aurea, still holding tightly to her hand. Thank you, she said simply, for saving my daughter, for keeping your promise to help me find her. Adrian was confused. I never promised, he began, then stopped as a strange memory surfaced. Not his own, but somehow accessible, as if their brief contact through the gateway had left an impression. He saw himself, or someone very like him, speaking to Mira in a Lyran laboratory, offering to protect Aurea if anything happened. That's impossible, he whispered. We never met before today. Mira's galaxy eyes held his, filled with something that might have been amusement or affection or both. Time is not as linear as your people believe. Adrian Moreno. Sometimes connections exist across its currents, drawing people together who are meant to find each other. Before Adrian could process this bewildering statement, Chen called them to the transport, and the moment was lost in the urgent need to escape before Kellen could organize a more forceful response from the council. As they sped away from the gateway complex, Adrian found himself seated beside Mira, with Aurea nestled between them, finally at peace now that her family was reunited. Looking at them, Adrian felt that same inexplicable sense of recognition, as if they were not strangers at all, but people he had somehow always been destined to meet. Whatever the truth behind their connection, one thing was certain: their story was far from over. The convergence of their lives had set in motion events that would challenge the very understanding of time itself, and perhaps reveal a bond between them that transcended the conventional boundaries of past, present, and future. Dr. Chen's private research facility was located on a floating platform above Nova Haven, offering spectacular views of the city below and the star-filled sky above. Unlike the austere, clinical environments of the council facilities, Chen's domain was a harmonious blend of advanced technology and natural elements. Living plants grew alongside quantum computers, and water features created a soothing background to the hum of sophisticated equipment. "Please, make yourselves comfortable," Chen invited, gesturing to a circular seating area overlooking the city lights. "We have much to discuss. But first, I imagine our visitors might appreciate refreshment after their journey." Assistants appeared with food and drink suitable for both human and Lyran physiology. Chen had evidently done his research on the biological differences between the species. Aurea approached the offerings with curiosity, selecting fruits that resembled those from her homeworld, while Mira studied everything with the careful observation of a scientist in an unfamiliar laboratory. Once they were settled, Chen turned to Mira with undisguised fascination. "I have so many questions, but perhaps we should begin with the most pressing. Why were you being pursued, and does that pursuit present an ongoing danger?" Mira's expression grew serious. "The Time Guards serve the Temporal Preservation Authority, what remains of Lyran governance in my time. Their purpose is to prevent paradoxes and maintain what they call temporal integrity." She glanced at Aurea with protective fierceness. "But their methods have become increasingly extreme, especially since the fracture." "The fracture?" Adrian inquired. Mira nodded gravely. "A catastrophic event in our history, or future, from your perspective. A temporal schism that split our civilization, sending some of us forward in time and others backward. Those who went forward eventually established the authority to prevent such disasters from recurring." "But you disagreed with their methods," Helen surmised. "Their solution was to eliminate all non-compliant temporal branches, entire timelines deemed too divergent from their approved sequence." Mira's galaxy eyes darkened with emotion. "Including the one where Aurea was born." Adrian felt a cold understanding dawn. "They weren't trying to capture Aurea. They were trying to erase her." "Yes," Mira confirmed. "According to authority protocols, she represents a critical temporal anomaly, a being whose existence defies their carefully constructed timeline. But I couldn't." Her voice faltered for the first time. "I couldn't let them erase my daughter." Aurea moved closer to her mother, seemingly understanding the gravity of the conversation despite her age. The crystal heart pendant glowed softly, as if responding to their shared emotion. "So you sent her through time," Adrian said, "to a point before the authority existed." Mira nodded. "I calculated that this era, your present, was a temporal fulcrum, a point from which multiple futures could emerge, including ones where the authority never gains the power to implement their extreme measures." Chen was listening with rapt attention. "Fascinating. You're suggesting that by relocating your daughter to our time, you might actually be altering the future development of your own civilization." "It was a desperate gamble," Mira admitted. "But not without scientific foundation. My research had shown that certain individuals possess what we call temporal resilience, the ability to exist across different timelines without creating paradoxes. Aurea is such an individual." Adrian glanced at the child with new understanding. "Because of her genetic makeup?" "Partially," Mira replied. "But also because of her connection to the crystal heart. These pendants aren't merely technology. They're living crystalline organisms that exist partially outside normal space-time. They form symbiotic bonds with their carriers, allowing us to perceive and navigate temporal currents." Helen leaned forward. Her scientific curiosity piqued. "Are you saying the crystal is alive?" "In a sense that's difficult to translate into your scientific frameworks. Yes," Mira confirmed. "It grows, adapts, and forms connections. Aurea's pendant is particularly special. It was grown specifically for her, attuned to her unique temporal signature." Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. "This explains much about the Lyran artifacts we've studied. We always sensed they were more than mere technology, but never understood the biological component. He turned to Mira. But what about the time guards? Can they follow you here? Mira's expression grew troubled. Not immediately. The gateway's collapse severed the direct connection. But they are persistent, and they have technology similar to mine. Given time, they will find a way. Then we must prepare, Chen stated simply, both scientifically and diplomatically. If these time guards do arrive, we should be ready to negotiate rather than fight. Adrian wasn't convinced. With all respect, Dr. Chen, they were trying to erase a child from existence. I'm not sure diplomacy is their priority. Perhaps not, Chen acknowledged. But understanding their perspective might help us find a solution that satisfies all parties. Mira shook her head. The authority does not compromise on what they consider temporal integrity. To them, Aurea represents a dangerous variable, a being whose existence could lead to unpredictable futures they cannot control. The conversation was interrupted by a soft chime from Chen's communication system. He excused himself to check the message, returning moments later with a grave expression. It seems Captain Kellen has escalated the situation. The full council is convening an emergency session to discuss what they're calling the temporal incursion incident. They're requesting, or rather demanding, our presence tomorrow morning. Adrian exchanged concerned glances with Helen. Despite Chen's intervention, the council clearly wasn't ready to relinquish jurisdiction over Mira and Aurea. What options do we have? Adrian asked. Chen considered this thoughtfully. We could refuse, of course, but that would likely result in more aggressive measures. Better to attend and present our case, with proper scientific evidence supporting Mira's claims about temporal resilience. We might convince them that Aurea poses no threat to our timeline. And if we can't? Helen asked the question no one wanted to voice. Chen's expression hardened slightly, revealing the steel beneath his scholarly demeanor. Then we exercise other options. The Oversight Committee has resources and contingencies for protecting significant scientific discoveries, even from the Council itself. The implications were clear. Chen was prepared to defy the Council if necessary to protect Mira and Aurea. Not just out of compassion, but because of their immense scientific importance. Mira had been quiet, observing this exchange with careful attention. Now she spoke, her voice calm but resolute. I appreciate your willingness to help us, but I won't allow others to risk themselves for our safety. If necessary, Aurea and I can continue our journey, find another time, another place. No, Adrian said firmly, surprising himself with the intensity of his response. You've both been through enough. Running isn't the answer. Not anymore. He turned to Chen. We'll attend the council session, but we'll be prepared with more than just scientific arguments. The council responds to political and practical considerations as well as scientific ones. Chen raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What did you have in mind, Dr. Moreno? Adrian glanced at Mira, who was watching him with those galaxy eyes that seemed to see more than just his physical presence. The Council's primary concern is stability, both of our timeline and of interstellar relations. We need to demonstrate that Mira's knowledge could benefit humanity, not threaten it. Mira nodded slowly, understanding his strategy. A cultural exchange. My temporal science for your protection. Exactly, Adrian agreed. You're not refugees. You're ambassadors from Lyra's past, offering knowledge that could transform our understanding of time itself. Chen's expression brightened. Brilliant approach. The Council can't resist the opportunity to acquire advanced temporal technology, especially if it's offered freely, rather than taken by force. As they began formulating their strategy for the Council meeting, Aurea tugged at Adrian's sleeve, drawing his attention away from the adults' conversation. Adrian, she said softly, thank you for finding Mother. The simple gratitude in her galaxy eyes touched something deep within him. You did most of the work, he told her with a smile. That was very brave, what you did at the gateway. Aurea shook her head. Not brave, just knew. She touched her crystal heart meaningfully. Knew you would help. Knew you were supposed to. There was something in her tone, a certainty beyond her years, that sent a strange shiver of recognition through Adrian. Before he could ask what she meant, Mira called Aurea to her side, showing her something in the facility's star maps that had captured her attention. Helen sidled up to Adrian as he watched the mother and daughter together. They're remarkable, she commented quietly. They are, Adrian agreed, unable to take his eyes off them. Helen gave him a knowing look. Especially Mira, wouldn't you say? Adrian felt a flush of embarrassment at Helen's perceptiveness. I don't know what you mean. Of course not, Helen replied with gentle teasing. It's perfectly normal to look at someone from another time period, like they're the answer to a question you didn't know you were asking. Before Adrian could formulate a denial, Chen called them back to continue planning for the council meeting. But Helen's observation lingered in his mind, unsettling, yet somehow resonant with truth. As the night progressed, they prepared their case meticulously, with Mira providing insights into Lyran temporal science that left even Chen speechless with admiration. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with them, and Chen showed them to private quarters where they could rest before the crucial meeting. Adrian found himself unable to sleep, his mind racing with the events of the day and the implications of what lay ahead. He wandered to the facility's observation deck, hoping the view of the stars might calm his thoughts. He was surprised to find Mira already there, gazing up at the night sky with an expression of subtle melancholy. Different stars, she said without turning, somehow sensing his presence. In my time, that constellation has already faded. Adrian moved to stand beside her, following her gaze to the stars. It must be disorienting, seeing everything out of its expected time. Mira smiled faintly. For Lyrans, time is not as rigid as humans perceive it. We see currents, possibilities. But yes, it is strange to be here, in a time I've only studied through historical records. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Adrian gathered the courage to ask the question that had been bothering him since their first contact through the gateway. Earlier, you implied that we had met before, that I had promised to protect Aurea. But that's impossible, isn't it? Mira turned to face him fully, her galaxy eyes reflecting the starlight in hypnotic patterns. Is it? You felt it too. The recognition when our hands touched across time. Adrian couldn't deny it. Yes, but how? There is a phenomenon we call temporal resonance, Mira explained. Some souls are connected across different points in time, drawn to each other through what you might call destiny, though it's actually a complex quantum entanglement of consciousness. She hesitated, then continued more softly. In my timeline, before I sent Aurea through the gateway, I knew someone, a colleague who helped me, who promised to find her if anything happened to me. Her galaxy eyes held his with meaning. He had your face, Adrian, your voice, your kindness, or... Adrian felt dizzy with the implications. You're saying, what? That I'm him? A version of him? I'm saying that time is more mysterious than even my people fully understand, Mira replied. But I believe there was a reason Aurea found you specifically. A reason you felt compelled to protect her. Despite all logic and regulation, she reached out slowly, her iridescent fingers gently touching his hand. The contact sent a warm current through Adrian's skin, and with it came a flash of memory, or was it vision, of himself in Lyran clothing, working alongside Mira in a crystal laboratory. Laughing at something she said, Adrian pulled back, disturbed yet fascinated. What was that? Temporal bleed-through, Mira said. Memories from another branch of time, another version of you. It happens sometimes when temporally resonant beings touch. Adrian struggled to process this information, his scientific mind battling with experiences that defied conventional explanation. Are you suggesting that in some other timeline, we knew each other? Mira's expression softened with what might have been affection, or nostalgia, or both. More than knew, Adrian. But that was another time, another path. What matters now is this present, Oria's safety, and the future we create here. Before Adrian could respond, a soft sound drew their attention. Oria stood in the doorway to the observation deck, rubbing sleep from her galaxy eyes. "Bad dream," she explained simply. Mira immediately went to her daughter, kneeling to embrace her. "The same one?" she asked gently. Oria nodded against her mother's shoulder. "Time guards. Breaking Heartgate." Adrian joined them, kneeling beside Mira. "It was just a dream. Oria, you're safe now." The girl looked between them, her expression wise beyond her years. "Together now, like should be." Something about her words and the way she looked at them with such certainty made Adrian wonder just how much Oria understood about temporal resonance, and about the connection Mira had just described between them. As they comforted Oria, and eventually returned her to bed, Adrian found himself contemplating the strange turns his life had taken since finding her at the gateway. From dedicated scientist following protocols, to fugitive protecting an alien child, and now to potential diplomat negotiating with the Council, all while grappling with the possibility that his connection to Mira and Oria transcended the linear progression of time itself. Whatever happened at the Council meeting tomorrow, Adrian knew with sudden clarity that his life had become irrevocably intertwined with theirs, and despite the dangers and uncertainties ahead, he couldn't bring himself to wish it otherwise. Morning arrived with a tense atmosphere permeating Chen's facility. As they prepared for the Council meeting, Adrian observed Mira and Oria with growing concern. Though Mira maintained a composed exterior, he could sense her apprehension. Oria seemed subdued, clutching her crystal heart pendant tightly, as if drawing strength from its gentle glow. "Are you ready for this?" Adrian asked Mira quietly, as they gathered their research materials. She nodded, her galaxy eyes resolute. "My people have a saying, time favors the brave but protects the wise. Today we must be both." Chen's private transport took them to the Council headquarters, an imposing structure of crystalline towers and security checkpoints in Nova Haven's governmental district. Captain Kellen met them at the entrance, his expression professionally neutral, but his posture tense. "The full Council is assembled," he informed them. "They've also invited representatives from the Scientific Oversight Committee and the Interstellar Diplomatic Corps." Chen nodded. "As expected, this matter crosses multiple jurisdictional boundaries." Kellen's gaze lingered on Mira and Oria, particularly the glowing pendants they both wore. "Those devices will need to be scanned before you enter the chamber." Mira stepped forward. "The crystals are symbiotic organisms partially bonded to our neural systems. Separating us would cause both physical and psychological distress." Kellen appeared skeptical, but Chen intervened smoothly. "I've personally verified their nature, Captain. The pendants pose no security threat. In fact, they're crucial evidence for our presentation to the Council." After a moment's hesitation, Kellen relented, though he assigned additional security to escort them through the building. Adrian stayed close to Oria, who seemed overwhelmed by the imposing architecture and the curious stares of Council personnel. The Council chamber itself was a vast circular room, dominated by a large round table, where 12 individuals of various species sat in ornate chairs. Behind them, tiered seating accommodated various officials, scientists, and diplomatic observers. The atmosphere was one of somber formality, the air heavy with the weight of decisions that could affect interstellar relations. At the head of the table sat High Counselor Vega, an elderly human woman whose stern expression and penetrating gaze had intimidated diplomats across the galaxy. She acknowledged their entrance with a slight nod, then formally opened the session. "We are convened to address the unprecedented temporal incursion that occurred at Gateway 9, she announced, her voice carrying effortlessly throughout the chamber. "Before us are those involved in or responsible for this incident, including," she paused, her gaze fixing on Mira, "a visitor claiming to be from Lyra's past." The formal proceedings began with Captain Kellen presenting his report on the Gateway activation and Mira's emergence. His account was factual, but framed the events as a security breach rather than a scientific breakthrough. Adrian noted how carefully Kellen emphasized the potential dangers while minimizing the humanitarian aspects of reuniting mother and child. When Kellen finished, Counselor Vega turned to them. "Dr. Chen, as the senior scientific authority present during these events, please provide your assessment." Chen stepped forward with the dignified confidence of a man whose lifetime achievements had earned him the right to speak his mind, even in such august company. "High Counselor, esteemed members of the Council, what we witnessed was not merely an incursion, but a controlled temporal extraction, a scientific achievement previously considered theoretical." He gestured toward Mira. "This is Dr. Mira of Lyra, a temporal physicist whose understanding of time exceeds our current knowledge by centuries. Her arrival, along with the technology she brings, represents the most significant scientific opportunity of our era." Chen proceeded to explain, in accessible yet precise terms, the nature of Lyran temporal science, as they now understood it, through Mira's explanations and the journal Adrian had obtained. His presentation was masterful, transforming the Council's perception from security threat to scientific wonder. When Chen concluded, Counselor Vega turned to Mira. "We would hear from you directly. Dr. Mira, explain your presence here and your intentions." Mira stepped forward with graceful confidence, her iridescent skin catching the chamber's light in a way that accentuated her otherworldly beauty. Adrian noticed several council members leaning forward, captivated despite themselves. "Honorable Council," Mira began, her accented voice carrying clearly, "I come before you not as an intruder, but as a scientist and a mother. In my time, the Temporal Preservation Authority enforces strict control over temporal pathways, eliminating what they deem non-compliant timelines, including the one where my daughter was born." She placed a protective hand on Oria's shoulder. "I sent her to your time, a temporal fulcrum point, to save her life. I followed to protect her and to offer an exchange. My knowledge of temporal physics for your protection." A murmur ran through the council as Mira activated a small device she had prepared with Chen, projecting a holographic display of Lyran temporal equations and diagrams. "This is merely a fraction of what I can share, knowledge that could transform your understanding of time and space, enabling advances in medicine, energy production, and interstellar travel." The scientific observers in the tiered seating stirred with obvious excitement, but Counselor Vega remained impassive. "Impressive, certainly. But you must understand our concerns. Your arrival has already disrupted established protocols. What assurance do we have that your presence won't create more serious temporal disturbances?" This was the opening Adrian had been waiting for. He stepped forward. "High Counselor, I've been studying this question intensively since Oria's arrival. Dr. Mira has introduced us to the concept of temporal resilience, a quantum state that allows certain individuals to exist across different timelines without creating paradoxes." Adrian activated his own display, showing the results of tests they had conducted on Oria's genetic structure and neural patterns. Both Mira and Oria possess this quality. Their presence here doesn't threaten our timeline. In fact, it represents a stabilizing influence according to Lyran temporal mathematics. One of the alien counselors, a Raxarian with translucent skin that revealed shifting thought patterns beneath, leaned forward. "And what of these time guards mentioned in Captain Kellen's report?" Do they pose a threat to Nova Haven? Mira answered with calm honesty. The authority will likely attempt to locate us eventually. However, without access to the specific gateway coordinates, that could take them years or even decades. By then, with your permission, I hope to have established diplomatic and scientific relationships that would make forceful intervention counterproductive, even from their perspective. The council members exchanged glances, clearly weighing the potential benefits against the risks. Adrian held his breath, knowing that everything hinged on this moment. Unexpectedly, it was Aurea who broke the tense silence. She stepped forward, her small figure commanding attention despite her size, and addressed the council in clear, carefully pronounced English. Not dangerous," she said simply. "Just a child who wants to live. Mother, not dangerous. Just wants to protect me." Her galaxy eyes swept across the council members. "We can help each other. Please." The simple sincerity of her appeal touched something that scientific arguments couldn't reach. Adrian saw several council members' expressions soften, including Councillor Vega's. After a long moment, Vega spoke. "The council will deliberate privately. Please wait outside." They were escorted to an antechamber, where they waited in tense silence. Adrian found himself standing close to Mira, their shoulders nearly touching as they both watched Aurea, who had curled up in a chair, exhausted by the emotional strain of the proceedings. "You were brilliant in there," Adrian said softly. Mira gave him a tired smile. "As were you. And Aurea." Her voice filled with pride. "She showed more courage than many adults would have." "She's remarkable," Adrian agreed. "You both are." Something in his tone must have conveyed more than his words, because Mira turned to face him fully, her galaxy eyes searching his. "Adrian, whatever happens today, I want you to know that finding you, or finding this version of you, has confirmed something I've always believed about time." "What's that?" he asked, drawn into the depth of her gaze. "That it's not a line or even a web, but a current that carries kindred souls toward each other, across whatever distance or barriers exist between them." Her iridescent hand found his, fingers intertwining naturally. "In every timeline where we exist, I believe we find each other." The touch sent another ripple of those strange, not quite memories through Adrian. Flashes of a life with Mira that he hadn't lived yet somehow remembered, working together in a laboratory filled with crystal technology, walking together through gardens of geometric plants, holding Aurea between them as they watched twin moons rise over Lyra's mountains. Before Adrian could respond to this bewildering, yet somehow comforting experience, the chamber doors reopened, and they were summoned back before the council. Councillor Vega's expression was unreadable as she delivered the council's decision. After careful consideration of the scientific, diplomatic, and security implications, the council has reached a consensus. The chamber fell absolutely silent as everyone awaited the verdict. Dr. Mira of Lyra and her daughter Aurea are granted provisional residency status under the Scientific Exchange Protocol, with Dr. Isaiah Chen appointed as their official liaison. Vega paused, then continued. They will be provided appropriate accommodation and research facilities, where Dr. Mira will share her knowledge of temporal physics with our scientific community. Relief washed through Adrian so intensely that he barely heard the rest of the formal proclamation, which outlined security protocols and reporting requirements. Beside him, Mira stood very still, her composure perfect, except for the slight trembling of her hand still clasped in his. "There is one additional matter," Vega added, fixing her gaze on Adrian. "Dr. Adrian Moreno." Adrian straightened, bracing himself for censure or punishment for his role in breaking council protocols. "The council recognizes that your actions, while technically in violation of established procedures, were motivated by both scientific curiosity and humanitarian concerns." Vega's expression softened slightly. "More importantly, Your unique rapport with both Dr. Mira and Aurea has proven valuable in this unprecedented situation. She consulted a datapad before continuing. Therefore, you are appointed as cultural liaison to our Lyran visitors, with joint oversight of the temporal research project alongside Dr. Chen. Additionally, given the child Aurea's apparent trust in you, you are authorized to serve as her secondary guardian in this timeline, supporting Dr. Mira in her care and education. Adrian stood speechless, overwhelmed by a decision so much more favorable than he had dared to hope. Beside him, Aurea slipped her small hand into his free one, so that he stood connected to both her and Mira in a perfect circuit. "Thank you, High Counselor," he finally managed. "I will honor this responsibility." As the formal session concluded and the various officials began to disperse, Adrian, Mira, and Aurea remained together, joined by Helen and Chen, who approached with expressions of delighted relief. "Congratulations," Helen said, embracing Adrian warmly. "Though I'm not surprised. Anyone who saw you with Aurea would understand you were meant to be her guardian." Chen nodded agreement. The council made a wise decision, scientifically and humanistically. "Now, shall we discuss arrangements for your new research facility? I have several suitable locations in mind." As they began making plans, Adrian noticed Aurea tugging at her mother's hand, whispering something in their native language. Mira listened, then smiled and nodded. "Aurea has a request," she told the others. "She would like to visit the place where Adrian found her, Gateway 9. She says it's important to her." Adrian was surprised but touched by the request. "Of course, if the council permits it. But why that particular location?" Aurea looked up at him with those galaxy eyes that seemed to see more than they should. "Because that's where our story began," she said simply. "And stories are important." Chen pulled some strings, and by sunset, they had permission to visit Gateway 9 under supervised conditions. The massive arch stood silent and dormant in the amber light of Nova Haven's sunset, much as it had been when Adrian first found Aurea huddled at its base. As they approached the gateway, Aurea ran ahead, stopping at the exact spot where she had emerged into this timeline. Her crystal heart pendant began to glow more intensely as she placed her small hand against the gateway's base. "What is she doing?" Helen asked softly. Mira watched her daughter with a tender expression. "Saying goodbye to the timeline we left behind, and greeting this new one. It's a Lyran tradition when making any significant transition." Adrian observed the solemn little ceremony with a sense of profound rightness. Despite all the chaos and danger of recent days, despite the uncertainties that still lay ahead with the Time Guards and the Temporal Preservation Authority, this moment felt perfect in its simplicity. A child acknowledging her journey from one life to another, embracing her new reality. When Aurea finished, she returned to them with a peaceful expression. "Now we can begin," she declared. "Begin what?" Adrian asked. Aurea looked between him and Mira with the wisdom of an old soul in a child's eyes. "Our new story. Together." As they stood there, in the fading light, the gateway behind them and Nova Haven's lights beginning to shimmer before them, Adrian felt Mira's hand slip into his once more. The contact brought no disorienting visions this time, only a sense of completion, as if pieces long separated had finally found their proper alignment. Whatever the complex temporal dynamics that had brought them together, whether destiny, scientific anomaly, or some combination of factors beyond current understanding, Adrian knew with certainty that Aurea was right. This was indeed the beginning of their story together, a story that would unfold across a future now bright with possibilities. The gateway hummed softly behind them, as if in agreement, its embedded crystals catching the last rays of sunset and transforming them into a spectrum of colors that surrounded them like a blessing from time itself. "Yes," Adrian agreed, looking from Aurea to Mira, feeling a sense of home he had never known before. Our new story begins now.